Amazing. Thanks, Iona, and thanks, Julie, for the really insightful session just now. We're going to be taking a look in this session at why staff leave and how you can keep them. So quite an in-depth topic, and I think in an hour we're not going to get through all the reasons as to why staff leave and all the ways in which you can keep them, but we're going to try our hardest within this session to share some insights that we have with our national data, and then we're going to be chatting with Jen and Lisa about some of the ways that they support staff wellbeing within their trust and resignation and staff retention as well. So in this session, I'm going to start by sharing some of the data that we have from the Edurio side with my colleague Amanda, and then we will be jumping in with Jen and Lisa from Ted Wragg Trust about some experiences in their organisation. I'm going to start a little bit by setting the scene with kind of my background. So I trained as a primary school teacher about 2017 was when I graduated, and decided to share a little photo. So this was me on my final placement at university. So this was at 5 a.m. walking past Worcester Racecourse on the way to the train station to get to placement on time, leaving at 5 a.m. And this photo here was the exact moment that I decided I wasn't going to be a teacher. So the thoughts that were going through my head at that time was there was all sorts that was playing on my mind in regards to teaching workload and the reasons why I felt that I wasn't going to be able to maintain it and go into the role. Finding it difficult to see a way of balancing work life and personal life due to the long work hours. There was strained relationships with staff in the school due to not very clear feedback amongst what they wanted, what they didn't want. There was financial pressures, so thinking about the worries about salary and rent following completion of university, as where I was living at the time was quite easy to afford and quite easy to live within those salaries, but some of the roles that I was looking for would mean moving into larger cities where rent was more expensive and our starting salaries would have been quite challenging. Support channels, feeling cut off and quite distant with the university. There was not much communication about how we could do that, and within the school there wasn't that much that I was working at the time. There wasn't much there in terms of that support from colleagues with those. There was leadership challenges. Felt like discussions were going nowhere about the support in place and things that we could do, and yeah, workload. Start getting up at leaving the house at 5 a.m. to get on the train to get to work, and then not getting home till 9 p.m. in the evening, and working weekends to do the planning and stuff. It was a lot, and it was taking a lot of time. At that time, those are my reasons why that led to me deciding that classroom teaching wasn't for me at the time. And what I thought is it's interesting to reflect on those, because actually when looking through the national data that we had this time, I see a lot of those responses and those feelings that I had back then on that day when I was taking the photo to go on Instagram in the morning of getting up nice and early. It's a nice photo. But those were the reasons behind my head on that day that I was like, you know what, this isn't for me. We're seeing at the moment that 43% of staff are considering resigning at the moment. So that's all staff within a school setting. And that's how it's changed over time. So we had that slight dip between 2020 and 2021, which was the year most affected by COVID. So like 2019 through to 2021, those years that were most affected. And we did see that staff were less likely to consider resigning during those years. And then since then, we've had that increase to around a steady now 43% of staff considering resigning. And then when looking at this data and thinking about those reasons why I had considered not going into teaching, these are the reasons why people are considering resigning. It was kind of, wow, those are very similar things, and we are 7 years on from when I had those feelings, and people are still experiencing those same reasons why they consider resigning: feeling undervalued, overwhelming workload, low staff morale in the workplace, pupil behaviour, poor work-life balance, and we can see there that those top reasons within those 43% up to 30% of staff that were considering resigning reported those as reasons why they were considering resigning. So there are some really valid reasons as to why people are putting this forward. Those top 5 that we can see there, feeling undervalued is the largest one, and Julie shared some of the reasons just now of how we can support well-being, and feeling undervalued and feeling valued by your employer and your colleagues and your staff is a big thing that helps feeling with that morale. Feeling valued in those roles is something that is so important to everybody, no matter what the role you do, and feeling valued in the input that you give and you share. It's unsurprising really that that comes up as one of the highest reasons why staff report as a reason for considering resigning is when they feel undervalued. If we look slightly deeper into that retention data, so that's the overview of staff in general within roles. If we break that down and have a look at that by the different roles within schools, we can see that the story is quite different when we look at the different roles. So we can see their teachers a steady incline over the last 3 years, 47%, up to half of teachers now are considering resigning in the last 3 months. You can see leadership have had a decrease, with a slightly sharper decrease in the last year, down to 32% of leaders considering resigning from their roles. But leaders with teaching responsibilities are slightly higher than just standard leaders. So leaders that don't have teaching responsibilities are around 32%, but leaders with teaching responsibilities, so that often covers like middle leaders or staff that have leadership responsibilities, heads of departments, those are around 43% considering resigning within their roles. Having a look at how that differs by role, so the reasons why they're considering resigning, we can see there are a couple of standout points to highlight here. So pupil behavior, for example, we see that teachers, 42% of them are likely to give pupil behavior as a reason for considering resigning. So taking into consideration the comments that we saw at the end of the last session with people saying they're seeing an increase in aggression and assaults and challenges with pupil behavior, it's unsurprising that we see that classroom-based roles such as teachers, teaching assistants, behavior is more of a reason why they would be considering resigning from their roles. When we look at leadership and leaders with teaching responsibility, they are some of the leaders in particular were the least likely to consider resigning, but one of the largest reasons why they consider resigning is workload and poor work-life balance. So we see that the leaders are finding the workload challenging, and that if they are considering resigning, that is the most likely reasons why they will be considering resigning within those roles. But another point here actually that I will raise is that the teaching assistants, we can see, are one of the roles that find financial reasons as one of the main reasons they would consider leaving their roles. And having spoken to a couple of people about some of the reasons why behind this data, during the pandemic, we saw that trend continue, and a lot of teaching assistants in those roles would take on other jobs and other roles and would get offered higher paid salaries from other roles, and those would get offered higher salaries and then would take up more hours with additional jobs and would reduce hours with teaching assistant work if needed to. That's anecdotal. It's not within the data, but it's from having spoken to people that I know that are within the profession that have considered resigning from the role that are in teaching assistant positions. Some of the reasons why that might be coming up within there. But yeah, looking at the data when comparing primary and secondary schools, we see that staff in secondary schools are more likely to consider resigning from their role constantly or often, and are less likely to rarely or never consider resigning from their roles. So generally, we see that primary staff are happier or less likely to consider resigning from their roles than those in secondary. There are some differences within the reasons why they consider resigning. You can see their primary, not enough resources for SEND support. 28% of staff are more likely to consider resigning because of that than those in secondary. We see that secondary are more likely to consider resigning from their role because of pupil behaviour, same as feeling undervalued and overwhelming workload compared to primary. But for primary, lack of staffing is a big issue. We see that staff are more likely to consider resigning from their role due to challenges such as lack of staffing. When looking at it by gender, we can see that male staff are more likely to consider resigning rarely or never compared to female members of staff. But female members of staff are more likely to consider resigning constantly or often. So some interesting nuances within when we look at gender. Again, differences between what has made you consider resigning between the gender roles. We see male members of staff are more likely to consider resigning due to relocation to a different area, mental health reasons, poor work-life balance, pupil behaviour, overwhelming workload. But female members of staff are more likely to consider resigning from their role due to feeling undervalued, or family reasons was another a big one, which we've recently done some work with MTPT, paternity teacher, which I'll go on to in a second, which will shed some light into some of those reasons around family reasons as well. We've got some information here about the parent versus non-parent data, which is quite interesting. So we asked the question around parents. So we've got information on whether they're expecting, whether they're parents or non-parents, but we don't have the knowledge around whether those children are like 20 in their 20s and their 30s, or whether they're 5, 6, 7, 8, much younger children. We just know whether they are parents versus non-parents, or whether they're currently expecting from their roles. We can see from this that non-parents are more likely to consider resigning from their role constantly or often compared to parents. So we see that the parents are less likely to consider resigning from their roles as opposed to non-parents are. Those that are expecting, considerably less likely to resign from their roles, and that's usually, well, likely down to the fact that they would get those employer benefits from during the maternity leave and the elements of those. So the expecting data would be expected that would be lower, but then what we see is that parents, again, less likely to consider resigning than non-parents. If we were to look at the reasons why staff, like parents versus non-parents, are likely to consider leaving their role, we can see here that parents, if we look over on the the right-hand side, sorry, family reasons, parents are more likely to consider resigning from their role for family reasons compared to non-parents, but there's not a massive difference within that. There's about 2% within those. But when we look at other reasons, for example, we see parents are more likely to consider their role because of reasons such as lack of staffing. That might be due to demands on their time and the requirements of them to be in school and staying over. You've got the likes of not enough resources for SEND, making work more challenging, overwhelming workload, feeling undervalued. It's that sense of belonging within school, and we see those differences in the reasons between staff and that are parents and those that are non-parents. I am gonna to hand over to my colleague Amanda now, just to have a discussion about listening organisations and how we can kind of take that understanding of the staff risk of resignation, the reasons why these staff are considering resigning, and how we can build kind of listening organisations to help overcome some of those challenges.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanta. I work at the customer engagement team here at Edurio, and I hope that that information didn't scare you too much, that Ben just revealed about what are the reasons that staff are saying are why they are considering leaving their posts. I really liked your intro, Ben, about your experience and why you decided to leave the teaching profession. I have to say mine echoes quite similarly to yours. I've also worked a few years in a few different education settings, and at the end of the day, it was that sense of workload and not feeling that value, combined with my own, I think, naivety and just kind of a bit of an unpreparedness to what that role entailed, that made me eventually say, I think I'm going to look for impact in education in a different way, and that's when I joined Edurio. And I'm really happy to be here today from this role, from my seat here. Ben just showed us a lot of information about what staff are telling us. What are those reasons why they're considering resigning? How that looks across different roles. Where are those biggest risk factors, especially around teachers, and what that looks like in different educational settings. So I hope you have some ideas already now, where you're coming from, what are your settings, what are your staff bodies looking like, and what that could mean for you. And like we said in the beginning of this session, we're going to talk today about what are the reasons why they're leaving and how can we keep them. And so I want this to be that transition into how we can keep our staff. And I think it's important to think about what we are doing with this information, the information that Ben just shared, and taking into account what Iona said in the beginning of our People Power Day today. Are we truly hearing our staff? Are we truly listening to them? This is in some ways, a sounding bell of an alarm of we have to help our staff. What are we doing now to really proactively think about supporting our staff through these concerns? And so what we've been working on at Edurio is this concept of listening organizations. What does it mean to truly listen to your staff? And we've come up with some hypotheses about what we think that looks like. Listening organizations, first and foremost, show their stakeholders that the feedback that they give to the leadership has an impact. This means we are closing feedback loops with our stakeholders. We are being transparent and communicating often and loudly what we are doing with that feedback that we've collected, how it has impacted the decisions that you've made as a leadership team in the trust or in the school. And we are keeping ourselves accountable for the progress that we promise to make. And we are keeping them informed about the steps we are taking to see the progress and impact of their feedback. Listening organizations are also places where staff want to work and will recommend this workplace as a good place to work to others. So we can ask ourselves, okay, what does that mean for us? What is the culture that we are building as an organization to make this a place that staff want to come to every day and are looking forward to working in? And finally, listening organizations will facilitate collaboration and support across levels, showing the benefit of the trust structure. What this means is that we're thinking not only about how staff may sometimes feel very siloed in their role in their school, but we're showing them that they are a part of something bigger. The benefits of being part of a trust means we have more opportunities to support professional development, to support career progression for our staff members, so that they can think and find ways that they can thrive, not only in their role where they're at now, but where they would like to grow as professionals later on. So what does this look like in the data? And I'll ask Ben to jump to the next slide. Iona kicked it off with, in the opening session, what are staff saying about that feedback to the leadership having an impact? And here we see that there is that about a quarter of staff saying that they rarely or never see that their feedback to the leadership has an impact. So once again, I ask that question, how are we closing that feedback loop for our staff? How are we signposting them to those support systems and to the progress that we are making with the information that they've given us? The next point is about how they recommend their workplace as a good place to work. And here we can be very proud to see that 64% of staff across our national data set say that they are likely to recommend their workplace as a good place to work. But we have 10% that are not likely to recommend their workplace as a good place to work. So we can ask ourselves, okay, what can we do better to listen to these staff, figure out what are their issues with their workplace, how can we support them to say that yes, they want to show up and they want others to be able to come and work in this place as well. And finally, how do they feel being part of a trust? Is this a beneficial structure for them to be a part of? And here we see 29% are not very confident or only slightly confident that being a part of a trust is beneficial. And I think this is really interesting. Again, what can we do as an organization to show them that they are a part of this bigger mission, that they have opportunities not only in their school, in their role, but across the trust? How can we bring them together so that they can share in their experiences, so that they can learn and feel that support not only in their school, but elsewhere in the trust? So with these thoughts in mind, I am very happy to welcome Jen and Lisa of Ted Wragg Trust to share their experiences with us today. Ted Wragg is working on many initiatives that support the idea of being a listening organization, I think in the true sense of the phrase. And they are monitoring and measuring the temperature across the organization and doing some really great work to keep their great people in the trust. Jen will first talk to us about the work the trust has done around their KPI measures. And I'm very happy to say that those include some of the questions that I just mentioned before, with some of these Edurio questions guiding them in that measurement. And then Lisa will take over and we'll talk about retention and the work that the trust is doing to retain its great people. Thank you very much for being so generous with your time today. Jen, I will hand it over to you. Oh, we don't hear you. Nope, still can't hear you.
Yamanta, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Lisa. Yeah. Okay. And there we have Jen.
Great. Okay, so my first challenge was we never use Zoom. We're always on Teams. So I had a minor panic about 5 minutes before when I realized it was on Zoom. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, so apart from that appalling introduction, for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Jen Figg. I'm the Executive Director of Communications, Operations and Growth at the Ted Wragg Trust. It's a real privilege to be here today and talk a little bit about our people strategy and how I think we've used the brilliant wealth of data we get from Edurio to really help us, particularly when we're thinking about how we listen to our staff and more importantly, how we support them and retain them. So I guess a little bit about us first. So we are now a trust of 18 schools. We took on our most recent school in March this year. And I think for many of you who are also growing, there's that kind of, often when you're looking at data, there's that ongoing tension of how you do that and how you make change consistently, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But we support about 15,500 students and their families, and we have about 2,500, coming up for 2,500 staff members. And I think the first thing in terms of staff retention for us starts at like actually right back at the recruitment process. And we talk a lot, as is on the screen at the moment, about showing our love through our values of being ambitious, selfless and collaborative. But I think you really see that lived through our recruitment processes. And I think that stands us in pretty good stead as we move forward, and certainly something that I think, as Lisa and I were reflecting and preparing for today, is something we find really helpful. But the thing really in terms of our conversation today, we have 3 strategic anchors as a trust. They are about being relentlessly positive in our collaboration, increasingly having the highest standards, but most importantly for today, around growing really great people. And we talk about the fact that we know we will have succeeded in that if our teams love coming to work, if they have an opportunity to enjoy high quality development, and they then have an opportunity to inspire others. And that is the kind of starting point for where we begin. And we have a people strategy, which Lisa lives and breathes every day and brings to life across our trust and all of our schools. And within that, we have this ambition to be the greatest place to work in the Southwest. And one of the things, as you were talking earlier, someone wrote in the chat, I think Jenny wrote in the chat, about this idea about national landscape and actually where it doesn't help us as we look to retain staff. Like, how do we make it a really great and attractive profession to be? And when we talk about being the greatest place to work in the Southwest, people often kind of around us think that is quite interesting, given that, you know, we can't offer huge amounts in terms of working from home or other kind of things that often bigger corporations would think about. But actually, and I hadn't planned to talk about this today, but in view of Jenny's point, I think there really is something about talking up the profession and the purpose and the brilliant privilege it is to be able to shape the next generation of the world. And I think there is that is something we certainly think about quite a lot as a trust, and how we support and encourage and really build up our leaders and their teams across our schools. So to that point, our people strategy talks about welcoming great people, developing great people, and retaining great people. Today, we're obviously mostly focusing on retaining, but in a little bit, I'm going to hand over to Lisa, who is our wonderful director of people, and she's going to talk about some of the kind of detailed programs of work we do. One of those is around actually also developing people as a way to retain them. But as I was preparing for today, I was thinking about, well, if I think about our people strategy journey, what are the kind of anchor points of it that I think are really relevant for our discussion? So I'm not planning to talk through all of this, but I think there were two things that struck me. The first was, and our colleagues from Edurio, who we are really proud to work alongside, talk about this frequently, but we really do use our surveys as a starting point rather than an end in of themselves. So we will often see things in survey data, but actually what we encourage our schools and what we do across our trust when we look at it holistically is to use that as a starting point of further investigation, rather than assuming that just completing that survey in of itself gives us the answer or tells us what we need to do next. We have been, we'll move into, in this coming year, our 5th staff survey. Our first was in the spring of 2021. And what that showed us was that leadership dynamics were not where we wanted them to be. So as a starting point, I think in our journey, we very much focused on building the culture and developing our leaders across our schools. And there are a number of ways on that slide that we have done that. And if anyone wants to talk about it in more detail another time, then I am more than happy to. But that definitely was a kind of starting point, because I think sometimes in organisations, and I don't think Lisa will disagree with me, when we think about staff benefits, people often think about employee assistance programs or free gym memberships or whatever the offer to our staff is. But our belief that's rooted in our leadership key concept is that our leaders in schools and across our trust are the most important people. They set the tone and the weather in our organisation. And if our people aren't feeling that every day, then actually no number of staff benefits that we can provide is going to make that tangible difference or make up that difference in terms of how they are feeling. And Lisa will talk to you, I should just say, about some of the more exciting recent things we're doing around launching our institute and around great people management, which I think really does take, without wishing to steal her thunder, the work we've done around leadership culture and really embeds that further down within our organisation, which we feel is the next step. So what does our data tell us, just really quickly? We have for a long time been quite good, I think, at holding ourselves to account. So our people strategy has had KPIs associated with it. They are broadly where we are pretty happy with. Obviously, the professional activities one went down this year, which we don't want to see. But actually, when we interrogated that further, as I mentioned at the start, we had a new school join us at the start of March this year. And actually, if we take they're our biggest secondary school now, if we take the responses out from that school, that figure increases to 46%. So we've clearly got huge amounts of work to do in terms of moving that forward, but it is still heading in the right direction. So we've had that in place for a while. We know that actually the number of staff considering, like the proportion of staff considering resigning is going down, and I was fascinated by Ben's data because it shows us that we're doing really well with teachers, but actually we're probably like not far off average with teaching assistants. So I'm going to go away and we can think about that some more. We've done and continue to do quite a lot of work on how being part of a trust is beneficial, and that's I think something that we will all I'm sure be doing. So we're happy that we're above national average. There's still a lot in the middle there that I think we want to kind of keep moving in the right direction. We, again, on the point about feedback to senior leadership, which was talked about earlier, again, kind of above national, we're really happy with that. But again, there's that sometimes in the middle, and we just really are working at a school level and across the trust at kind of unpicking that and seeing what we can do. And one of the things, and I was conscious of time today, so I haven't put slides in about it, but we now have a really well organised system, I think, of when we receive our Edurio data, our data team provides reports to our head teachers that shows them their top results against benchmark, their bottom results against benchmark, and any trends that they need to be aware of, and they build their action plans from that. So our head teachers are interrogating the data, and they'll go in and they'll read the comments and do all of those things. Actually, in terms of us enabling them, we have all that in place, and I think that has made a significant difference to how they are then able to take those results forward. So if anyone, like, we're always up for sharing those things, so if anyone would like to see them, then I'll pop my contact details in the chat and we would be more than happy to share. Again, so I think just a really quick canter through these, but we're happy we're heading in the right direction here with recommend as a place to work. And one of the things we're really proud of when we look at it is the longer a school is in our trust, to that point about the benefit of being in, that increases. So if we look at schools that have been in our trust longer than a year, it goes up from 75 to 78%. If we look at schools that have been in our trust longer than 3 years, it increases again to 82. So those are the kind of level of detail we are looking at. But and I think it just caught the end of your last session, but that piece around workload also, we've done a huge amount of work to try and reduce any unnecessary burden with our teachers in particular, which I think you will see has paid dividend in the number of teachers or the proportion of teachers thinking about resigning. But that is also a key piece of work, and there are some case studies and bits and pieces out there for some of our schools on how they have done that. The final bit, in terms of, before I hand over to Lisa to talk about the specifics, was around how do we take this kind of really great work that's already been happening and how do we take it to the next level? So we had systems in place that were working well in our schools in terms of survey data, but how do we really focus the mind? And in a kind of environment over the last couple of years that has seen quite a lot of political change, it has often felt challenging at times to identify what are the key indicators we should be thinking about. And around 12 months ago, we came together as a trust and really took the long-term cathedral thinking approach to say, well, actually, regardless of what the external environment looks like, we want to come up with some indicators that we can be really proud of in the long term that we don't think will change. So we've brazenly stolen the format for anyone who's read the Next Gen Governance by the CST. The circles will look familiar to you. But we have used that to think about, actually, in terms of where we want to go, what might it look like? So our kind of key metric is around children loving coming to school in a kind of 3 to 5 year window. And the bit that is relevant for our discussion today, we're talking about our team loving coming to work and how we increase that. And then on the outer ring of things that we review termly anyway, you will see information there that inform us. So staff absence, coaching data, other things. But the move to that, and to create what we have called our Ted Wragg Advantage, linking back to actually how as a trust do you demonstrate what you are able to do, has been to get all of our schools to think about these top 6 measures and to set some targets for themselves over the next kind of 4 to 5 year period. And we have amalgamated those on the screen. I don't think those will be our final version. We are kind of working through those with our leaders, but what we have done is embed this so they are at the top of our biannual health check processes with our team, with our school teams, as we look at their performance, and also at the top of all of our kind of trustee reports and other things. So that for us, we think, is the kind of next big thing in terms of how we take it from something that individually we are all looking at and working really hard on, and how do we really make sure that staff loving coming to work and actually value us working together, which is a combination of both parents and staff. How do we bring those together and really put them front and centre about how we move forward? So I am going to hand over to Lisa, and Lisa, I will drive your slides.
Thank you, Jen. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lisa Thomas. I'm Director of People at the Ted Wragg Trust. Before I move on to some of the things we're doing, does anybody have any questions for Jen that they want to pop in the chat? Okay, if we do have questions, please pop them in the chat and Jen and I can pick them up at the end of the session. So just to start with, our people strategy is quite simple. We want to welcome, retain and develop great people. And what our people strategy does for me as Director of People is really focus my mind on those 3 areas. So every year I'm thinking, okay, what else can we do to make sure we are retaining our great people? Can I go to the next slide, Jen? So we split our work into 2 areas. One is about continuous improvement and improving what we've got and what we're currently doing. And the other one is about disruptive innovation. And that's more kind of project-based. So it's often got a project board, and that's different and new things that we want to implement to help us make us the greatest place to work in the Southwest. So in terms of continuous improvement, so far we've amalgamated our people policy, and we now only have 1 policy for HR. We've simplified our HR and SCR audits, and we continue to develop our IT system. So we've now got manager self-service, and employees can put their expenses online, which is much easier than filling out a form and sending it to their manager, which is what we were doing before. So everything we do, we're very intentional about, if we're going to do it, is it going to improve workload? Is it going to improve well-being? What's it going to do for our staff? The 2 things in terms of continuous improvement we are looking at and will continue to look at next year is enhancing our EAP and benefits, and we're looking at that really closely. And excitingly, we're working on becoming a life-friendly school. We also have been working quite closely with the MTPT project, which is around supporting teachers on maternity leave, but we've taken this a bit wider. So we're looking at actually how can we make our school life friendly for all our employees at whatever stage they're at, whether they're young and they're just having children, whether they're older and they're caring for teenagers and parents potentially. Like we're looking carefully at every kind of step of an employee's own personal cycle to make sure that we are supporting them when and where we need to. So in terms of disruptive innovation, we've been researching and doing a lot of pilots around our great people management, and I will talk to you about that a bit more in a minute. We've harmonised our terms and conditions across our trust, which has made a real difference, certainly centrally in terms of managing that. And we've outsourced our payroll, so that again has just really helped centrally and made sure that we have a really good and efficient payroll service. The 2 things I want to talk to you about today are things that we are currently working on. The first is our Ted Wragg Institute that Jen mentioned earlier, and then our Great People Management Programme, which we are rolling out in September. So in terms of our Ted Wragg Institute, this became live last year. It is fairly new and we are developing it, but it is an amazing offer. what we realised was that we do a lot of professional development across the trust, but it wasn't in one place. So some people were doing some things, I was doing other things. So we wanted to get it all in one place. So we now have a brochure which is enormous about all the professional development that we offer to our staff, and there is literally something for everybody there. There's also networks, there's cohort specific training, there's a whole wealth of things, and actually it is on our website if you want to go and have a look at it. I've taken the sign up QR codes off it on the website, but it is there if you want to flick through. But there is a lot of development there, and it's just a really exciting offer that so many staff have really valued, just to be able to sit in one place and see what they can do to develop with their next steps. Alongside the Ted Wragg Institute, we also run a trust-wide investment day for all employees, and that is literally all employees. So last year, we provided professional development for over 1,500 people across 2 sites, and it was an amazing day, full of networking, full of brilliant opportunities for such a wide variety of different professional development, depending on where you were and what you were doing in our trust. And to take this to the next step, we are now just about to launch our new online learning platform, and that is going to make a really real difference in terms of just staff being able to easily see what's available, easily book on it, understand what's there and what they can do, and work with their manager to find the really best development for that individual person. Can I go to the next one, Jen? So great people management, I will try not to talk about forever because it is the thing that really excites me. This is a program that Tamsin Francis and I have been working on actually we realised for 3 years. We've done a lot of research into this. We've run pilots over the last 2 years in various different schools in our trust. And the reason 3 years ago we started thinking about this was that all the evidence that I could come across and all the research I did showed me that actually somebody's direct line manager is really the most important person for that employee. You know, Ben pointed out in his data that actually feeling undervalued was one of the main reasons people leave. Actually, that is directly impacted by that person that manages you. We know that you're a great teacher, you become a great head of department, you then manage people, you might become an assistant head, you might manage more people. We put people into management positions, but we don't actually show them how to be a great manager. So can I go to the next slide, Jen? So the structure of our program, it's a 2-year program, and every single manager in our trust will be enrolled on the program and will need to go through it. We've spent a long time thinking about the whys and why are we doing this? Why do we want to have great people managers in our organisation? And actually, the real fact is that actually it is our managers that are going to retain our great people. They're going to build great teams, and they're going to ensure that we have the very best people in our schools to support our children. So we've thought a lot about what our great managers need to do, why they need to do it, and also how they do it. So what kind of characteristics do our great managers have? Next slide, please, Jen. So in terms of the program, and I hope you can see that, we've split it into two distinct years. So we really believe, based on the work of Covey and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that actually you cannot be a great manager unless you know yourself really well. So the first year is very much about personal mastery and understanding yourself and the emotional intelligence that you need to be a great manager. And the second year then develops that further, and then that is more about how you then manage people, how you support having the highest standards, and how you build healthy teams. It is a very exciting program. We will be, all schools are going to start it in September, and each school will deliver it in their own context, and we will support them with their implementation to make sure that all our people have the very best managers in place in the trust, and I'm very excited about it. I think that's questions.
Thank you so much, Jen and Lisa. Yes, I think this is a time for any questions to pop into the chat. While people start thinking about what their questions are and write them into the chat, I just want to share some of the things that I heard from what you said, and that really ring true for me. I'm really inspired by your idea of cathedral thinking. I think in that idea of trends are coming and going. There are new ways to do this. There are new ways to do that, and we're sometimes very eager to try something new to fix problems that we have. But by understanding what's driving you at your core and keeping true to that, I think that's a really powerful place to be, and shows a lot of like you said, that personal mastery as an organization to say that these are our principles that we're working with. I really like that you are triangulating your data and you're not just looking at one source, but you're thinking about what else is impacting staff and why they may leave and why they are going to stay. And that idea of a life-friendly school for all your employees, I think that's something where everyone should be thinking about what is a life-friendly employer in general, but I think especially in the education. Thank you very much. Let's take a look at what we have in the chat. And
so, shall I answer Sarah's? Put a
yes,
couple of
please go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah. Sarah, we use iTrent for our HRIS system, and it's managed through Neo People. But manager self-service has been fairly revolutionary. I think Jen would agree with that. It's just so much easier. In terms of how much resource underpins the people strategy, that's a really difficult one to answer, because we're very clear that this is not an HR strategy. This is a trust people strategy. So actually, although my title might be Director of People, and I do live and breathe the strategy, it is not my strategy, it is everybody's strategy. So we've done a lot of work around that, and a lot of work with heads about how they live our strategy in their schools. And and again, you can see on our website some of the assets that schools have put together, telling their own staff context specific about how they are living our people strategy. So I'm not quite sure I can answer that, but you certainly need somebody to drive the strategy, because I think it's easy to get a lovely looking asset together and send it out, but actually you just have to keep talking about it and making sure it's embedded across the trust. Sarah, you have one last question. Is great people management delivered in-house? Yes. So we are providing all the resources for the schools to deliver it themselves. So it would probably generally be the head or a great people manager lead in each school will be delivering all the training. It is really ambitious. We have been talking about it for a long time. We've been really considerate about the time and how we can get this implemented in schools. We've reduced some of our network meetings to allow this to happen. Jenny, I think I'm talking to your point as well now in terms of convincing heads and SLTs. We've also done a lot of work on the why, and a lot of articulation of how this can really impact, certainly how poor people management can definitely impact. And so it's about telling the stories, and we've got loads of stories that our heads and our SLTs will talk about the impact of not having great people management. So we've narrated it. John, I don't know if you want to jump in. We've narrated it for such a long time that we have really got buy-in. We will help schools implement, and we will sit down and we'll talk through each module and how they can do it and how long it will take and when they can do it. And we can make it school specific, but they are very much all up for it.
Yeah, and I think all I would add to that is I think we're really fortunate, and I think there are two factors. One is that we are a geographically coherent trust, which means we have an opportunity that we meet with our head teachers every 3 weeks with all of our directors together. We have those opportunities together to both build those kind of interpersonal relationships and also really think about what the things that are going to like make the big difference as we move forward. As Lisa said, I think we've given them a lot of time, and they've been on that journey with us to help us develop the programme. And that doesn't mean that it has always been easy, because we have had those questions about, but if I'm doing this, what am I not doing? And that is where the implementation is really important, because you can't do it all. And I think we're really proud of what those workload statistics say, but in order for those to remain the same, we needed to be really deliberate about, if we're doing this, what aren't we going to do? And as Lisa said, we have adjusted. The other piece, the other two pieces of information that I think may be helpful is, one is we've given as much agency as possible to our heads. So we have said, if you want to deliver this whole programme in a year because you think that's what you want to do and you want to get it done and you want it to be really quick, then we will come and work with you to do that. If you want to tell us that actually you want to do it in 3 and not 2, then let's have that conversation. So really being flexible, being really clear about the time that it will take, doing as much to enable in terms of the resources, offering to come and deliver some of it for them if they would like. And the second part of that is, having worked with pilot schools over the last couple of years, which was totally voluntary on their part to kind of get involved earlier, we were in a really lovely position that earlier this term, when we sat down and we launched the kind of final programme, actually it was some of the senior leaders in our schools who came and delivered part of that, and they had also recorded a video of one of them actually delivering a keeping on track meeting, so that if you're made a manager, you have a resource to look at and see what does that look like. But I think that sense of it being co-created together, and actually other people standing up and leading it. So Lisa's point about the fact that it's not her programme, we are really deliberate in how we choose to share some of those things, which I think has made a difference. But I do appreciate we're lucky. We are quite geographically close together. And I think that work around leadership culture and development is integral to it.
Jenny, just in answer to your question about worrying that your results will slip if you redirect attention to management training, I would argue that the results should be going up. If you've got happy staff, you've got happy kids, and therefore you've got increased outcomes. All the evidence is there that is the case. So actually, I think it's about repositioning that question about, actually, how do we make our staff happy will increase our outcomes. And one of the main ways you will do that is through making sure they've got brilliant managers who know how to support them, look after them, and make sure they're happy in their roles.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask? Some examples that they'd like to hear more from Lisa or Jen?
I'll put my email in the chat, and if you want to connect with Jen or I, please do.
Yeah. Thank you again. Are any final remarks from Jen or Lisa about what others can do to retain their staff?
I just think it's a balance between always having that in your head. So are there quick wins? Some of that stuff I talked about were quick wins, but actually, what are those big moves that you need to make to stand out and be a place that people want to work?
Yeah. Maybe in the last 4 minutes that we have, could you kind of share how you plan on following of the progress of this management training?
So we have. I didn't share it because I didn't know if we would have time, but we have a lot of QA around it in terms of making sure that everybody is attending the training. but also the impact. And the impact we will, and I'm not just saying this because I'm sitting in an Edurio meeting, but we will be doing that through our staff surveys. So we've looked at the staff survey questions that could and will be affected by this programme, and we will really carefully track those to make sure that it is having an impact. And at Ted Wragg, nothing's ever finished. So if we need to tweak it, if we need to change it, we will do so.
Wonderful. Thank you very much both for your time and for sharing your wonderful work that you're working on.